अस्सलाम वालेकुम बेटा, क्या हाल है? बच्चे कैसे हैं आप? ठीक हैं, खैरियत से हैं, तबीयत से ठीक है? चलें, थैंक यू जी। बेटा आज हमने वी आर गोइंग टू लुक फॉरवर्ड फॉर अ नेक्स्ट chapter, and the chapter's name is Introduction to Communication. Introduction to Communication, in which introduction includes our communication on occasions, activities, incidents, events that is based on conversation, formal or informal, discussions, phone calls, meetings, video conferences, telecon conferencing, presentations, even gossiping, even chatting, and very others. So this was actually the general introduction to communication. Now, what is communication? Coming towards that, what is communication? Actually, first we will see that from where communication, the word originated. The word communication originated from the Latin word Latin, Latin word communicare, COMMUNICARE, communicare. That means to share, to impart, to share, to impart, or to commune, COMMUNE, commune. It is the genuine meaning of communicare was to share, impart, or to commune, but its literal meaning. There are two types of meanings: general meanings and literal meanings. So the literal meaning includes any kind of giving or sharing information, giving or sharing information. When I said this, giving and sharing information, it can be of important based, it can be of situational based, it can be of idea based, it can be of knowledge based, it can be a just information of dynamic, interactive, or any kind of. Now, what are the processes of communication? The chief process of communication is a dynamic, interactive process, very crucial process that includes the effective transmission of facts, 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 ideas, thoughts, feelings, and values. And values. So actually, if we consider it, it is actually the development of the information and understanding required for effective group functioning. The word process suggests the communication exists as a flow through a sequence or a series of steps. Communication is any behavior that results in an exchange of meaning. What is communication? Communication is any behavior that results in an exchange of meaning by the American Management Association. So communication is an exchange of meaning and understanding of meaning. So meaning is the central of the communication. Meaning, 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 or the transmission of meaning is the central objective of communication. So that's why people used to say that communication is not complete unless the message is decoded. The message is decoded and understood by the receiver. Now, overall, communication is between two persons or more than two persons. At least there must be a sender, the person who gives information, the person who sends information, the person who conveys information. And on the other hand is the receiver, the person who receives, the person who reads, the person who interprets the writing. So this is how the communication is completed, by decoded and understood by the receiver. By the receiver. Effective communication is purposive symbolic interchange resulting in workable understanding and agreement between the sender and the receiver. This is said by George T. Vardaman. George T. Vardaman. There is another definition by Keith Davis, that is, communication is the transfer of information and understanding from one person to another person. It is a way of reaching others with facts, ideas, thoughts, and values. Actually, the communication is an interactive, means the relationship between the interaction process. The two communication agents involved in the communication process are, first of all, sender, S-E-N-D-E-R, sender, and the receiver, R-E-C-E-I-V-E-R, receiver. Both of the communication agent exert a reciprocal influence, means they communicate with each other, means they talk with each other, means they answer and question with each other, means they try to speak to each other. So this was actually what is communication. So till now, I started with a chapter, Introduction to Communication. I gave you the general introduction, then what is communication, the Latin word meaning, the literal word meaning, the communication, and the communication definition by American Management Association, then by George T. Vardaman, then Keith Davis, then I told you the sender and receiver. Now it is process of communication. Process of communication. Actually, first of all, I have told you that there are two persons, two parties, two individuals minimum included in it. Out of them, one is the sender and the other one is receiver. The person who is sender, he sends, he is an active person. The person who is a receiver, he or she might be a passive. Passive means does not move, does not speak, just understand, and the message is given in a proper language. So there must be a proper common language. Communication can be defined as the exchange of information, ideas, or knowledge between a sender and a receiver through an accepted code of symbols, through an accepted code of symbols. For example, there is a communication cycle. This cycle involves various elements. This cycle involves uh, various elements, out of which the leading one is formulation, 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 where the sender forms the content of the message. He or she forms, explores, finds, develops the content, the material of the message to be sent. This, as the meaning suggests, formulation. Formulation means form, find, search out, explore. This formulation depends on the level of experience, intelligence, knowledge, and the purpose of the sender. If a specialist is sending a message to another specialist, he may use different and complex language, but if a person of higher professional is sending a message to a uneducated person, his experience, knowledge will suggest that what the words are used for the formulation message. The second is actually a message. The content, once formed, is called the message. When you have formed a content, found a content, write a content, that is called a proper message. The sender in the first one is formulation, second is message, the third is encodes. Now the sender encodes the message using the basic tool. This tool is another, but the language used words, actions, signs, objects, or a combination of these. The delivery happens through channels, for example, multimedia or communication or letter or postal address or internet or messages or internet by using Gmail, Yahoo. So all these are the channels. Formulation, message, encodes, channels. Then moving towards the receiver. The receiver receives the message through this multimedia or internet or messaging process. Then it kinds to decodes to reveal what is written in a message, decode it, acts on it. If the message received is the same as the message sent, there will be an appropriate response. Then the last one is feedback. The transmission of the receiver's response to the sender is called feedback. So feedback is essential as it measures the effectiveness of communication. When a message is sent, the communication cycle is completely on when the response from the recipient of the message. Otherwise, if you did not get a feedback, then you are worried that your message is transferred or not, read or not, understand or not. So these are complications when feedback means the response. The receiver response actually is the receiver response. So elements or factors or components of communication are, first of all, recently I have told you the process of communication. Process of communication, I told you, includes communication cycle. First one is formulation, second is message, third is encodes, fourth is channels, fifth is receiver, then decoding and this feedback. The last one is the feedback. Now it is elements of communication, elements of communication or factors or components of communication. The process of communication has 6 major elements or factors that includes, first of all, context. Second is encoder or sender, encoder slash sender. Third one is message. Fourth one is medium or channel. Fifth is decoder or receiver. Actually, decoder or receiver is a one word. You have to learn one, either decoder or receiver. The best one is context, second sender, third message, fourth channel, fifth receiver, sixth feedback. But you can put a slash there, feedback or response, medium or channel. So I want to start with the first one in detail. Context. Context is the situation or a case with which communication takes place, or an atmosphere that surrounds a specific piece of communication. Context actually is where, where means in summer or winter, means in January or December, means in hotness or coldness, means in Pakistan or Japan. This is context. Context plays a very important part in how a message is encoded or decoded. How a message is being sent or received. Actually, encoded or decoded is sender or receiver. The same message can have a complete different meaning depending on the situation, emotions, memories, reactions, ideas vary in different situations. Whether we communicate orally or writing a message begins with context. Context is actually a very vast field that includes your country, your culture, your organizations, and etc. The external stimuli. The stimuli is plural of stimulus. STIMULI. The stimuli is plural of stimulus, which means prompt. What prompts a sender to transmit his message is its stimulus. So the external stimuli may be a letter. This stimulus or the stimuli may be a letter, any kind of note, memo, or mail, fax, telephone call, or a meeting, or a meeting, or a meeting, even a conversation. So this is external stimuli includes letter, note, electronic mail, fax, telephone call, meeting, or conversation. The internal stimuli have a complex influence on how a person or on how a person influence on how a person, sender or receiver, translates ideas into a message. When a person encodes his own view of the world, affects the choices he makes in language. What sort of language you prefer? Some people feel good at Urdu, English, Punjabi, Saraiki. So this is how the language preferred. His way of communication is influenced by his opinions, by his gestures, by his past experiences, by his likes and dislikes, by his job, by his job statuses, by his job statuses, education, and confidence in communication skills. So this is the first one. The context has two things. The first one was the external stimuli, and the second is the internal stimuli. Now the second one, encoder or sender. Actually, communication starts with the sender, a person who sends a message. A person who sends a message is called the encoder or a sender. He may be a writer or speaker, depending on whether his message is in written or oral form. Now, this is your choice. You send your message in written form, in written letters, in written mails, or you communicate, you conversate, you address, you communicate from one way to another. So it is orally. He tries to choose symbols, usually words, which express his message correctly so that the receiver may understand it and react according to the desires. It is the prime task of a sender to encode his message, means properly, correctly, clearly, and completely. He should not use the words which are very complex, difficult, hard to understand. He must have the persecution and consideration for his receiver's viewpoint. He must have the familiarity that how much the person who is going to receive a message is educated. He, she can use that much knowledge, ideas. So it is the sender who has to decide which words and what sort of expression will communicate his message. Whoever is sending, it is his control what to say, how to say, how many good words he can choose for it, how beautifully, artistically designed word. So this was encoder and decoder. Third one is message. Actually, the message is the main idea, the main information, the main target, the main focus, the main language, the main concept which you try to transmit to the receiver in order to achieve understanding. It makes a connection between sender and receiver of the message. No message can achieve its purpose unless it has unity of thought. Unity of means singleness. Uniqueness of thought means main thought, consistency in expression, and particular emphasis on the main point. The message can be a verbal or written, both written or oral, verbal or written. First of all, the sender must be very clear about the message and about the contents in it. So the fourth one is medium or channel. A communication medium or channel is the means or techniques that used to convey one message from sender to another, the receiver. It may be including conversations, all kinds of letters, argumentative letters, descriptive letters, telephone calls, radio, television programs. The sender should choose a channel that suits his communication purpose, needs of the message, conditions necessary, while selecting the relationship between the sender and the receiver. So this is how you choose. Some people choose the news channel. Some people choose the sports channel. Some people choose the geographic channels. Some people use in sending mails the Gmail. Some choose Yahoo. Some use Zoom. Some use Google Classroom. Some use the WhatsApp group. So this is how the medium or channel is used. Decoder or receiver. Actually, the receiver of the message actually is the reader or listener, also known as decoder, also known as decoder. Now, when a message is now when a message is now when a message is being received, the receiver assigns certain meanings to it. This is called a process of decoding. The factors that affect the decoding of a message are knowledge, experience, and attitude. Because how complex you use, what sort of language you use, what sort of decoding, it is hardly to understand. Therefore, the doctor's writing is hardly to understand by a patient or a normal literate person. The miscommunication, the miscommunication can occur an intended message. Therefore, it is very important at the center while drafting his message should consider all these factors to rule out or minimize the possibility of its being misunderstood or misinterpreted. The last one we are going to cover is the feedback or response. Actually, feedback is an essential part of successful communication. It is the receiver's response to the sender's message. Feedback provides continuity in the communication. It indicates effective understanding or misunderstanding of the message. It also it also it also it also stimulates it also stimulates the readers, supervisors, and colleges. So the ability to provide appropriate feedback can assist the development of effective working relationship and the productivity of the business. These were elements. Now coming towards the levels of communication. Levels of communication. Having understood the communication process, let us now study the various levels at which human being communication takes place. And these are extrapersonal, intrapersonal, interpersonal, organizational, and mass media. So discussing about the first one, extrapersonal communication. Actually, communication between human beings and non-human entities is extrapersonal. Communication between human beings and non-human being individuals is extra personal. For example, when your pet cat comes to you wagging its tail, or you can use dog, as soon as you return home from work, it is an example of extra personal communication. Or another, a parrot responding to your greeting is another example. So the communication of birds or animals towards human beings is extra personal. Intrapersonal. Intrapersonal communication takes place within an individual. We know that the brain is linked to all parts. Intra means within individual. Brain is linked to all parts of the body organs by an electrochemical system that is known as neurons. For example, when you begin to feel hot, this information is sent to the brain and you may decide to turn on the cooler. You feel coldness, you feel hotness, you feel smelly. So there are six senses: touch, eye, tactile, hearing. So the responding to these instructions sent from the brain to the hand, in this case, the relevant organ is the sender and the electrochemical impulses is the message and the brain is the receiver. The example of intrapersonal is the organ is the sender, the electrochemical pulse is the message, and the brain is the receiver. Next, inter. Second was intrapersonal, within this, when you feel cold, when you feel hot, when your eyes blink. So interpersonal communication at this level refers to the sharing of information among people. Sharing of information among sharing of information among the peoples. When I said among the peoples, you may compare or communicate such as organizations and intrapersonal in it. We need to examine how many people are involved, how close they are to one another physically, how many sensory channels are used, and the feedback is provided. Actually, interpersonal communication can be formal or informal. It can be of two types. For example, your interaction with a sales clerk in a store is different from that what your friends or your teacher or your family members. Interaction between the panel members and the candidate appearing to the different form of the conversation between two candidates waiting outside. Organizational communication. Organizational includes all these: internal, operational, external operational, personal operational. Actually, organizational is at the chain system, different hierarchical levels. As we have learned, it is extremely necessary for the subsistence of any organization. It includes internal operational. All communication that occurs in the process of operations with an organization is classified as internal operational. The work related communication that an organization has with people outside the organizations is called external. Internal within the organization, external out of the organization, personal. All communication that for business or official purpose is called personal communication. Last of all is the mass communication. Actually, mass communication is meant for large mass communication is meant for large audience and requires a medium to transmit information. There are several mass media such as, for example, journals, books, televisions, newspapers. So, press interviews given by the chairman of a large firm. Advertisement form of communication is more persuasive in natural, any other form or requires the different visual media. Oral communication through mass media such as microphones, speakers, amplifiers, written form of need printed or visual media. These are the characteristics of mass communication are as follows. Large reach. Mass communication has the capacity to reach audience over a wide geographical area throughout Multan, throughout Lahore, throughout Punjab, throughout Pakistan. The newspapers are driven. Impersonality. Mass communication is largely impersonal as the participants are unknown to each other. Presence of gatekeeper. Mass communication needs additional persons, institutions to convey the message from a sender to receiver. This gatekeeper is also known as mediator, mediator, mediator. Information from the source to the target audience through a mass media. For example, in a newspaper, the editor decides which news makes it to the hands of the reader. So the editor is the gatekeeper. Flow of communication. Information flows in an organization, both formally and informally, to do one's job. In other words, flow through formal channels. The main lines of organizational communication are interoperational and external operational. Communication is formal. So vertical communication consists of communication up and down the organization's chain of command. Vertical communication can be classified as downward communication and upward communication according to the directions of its flow. Some companies are flowing downward, so downward communication flows from a manager down to the chain command. When manager informs, instruct, or advise to request their subordinates to the communication that flows to the communication that flows in downward pattern. This is generally used to convey the routine informations or the policies or procedures or clarifications asked for an analysis, etc. The upward communication is actually reported to inform their superiors. Downwards means from head to the employees, and from upward communication from the employees inform their superiors, from inferiors to the superiors, from subordinates to the superiors, or the present findings and recommendations to their superiors. So upward communication keeps managers aware of the business operations, how must be done, how must it continued, what sort of situation is there. So if you are very good at that, they feel about their jobs, colleagues, organizations in general. So this is the last. The mass communication is discussed at flow of channel. Vertical communication. Vertical communication includes two: downward communication and upward communication. Now horizontal communication. Actually, horizontal and lateral communication takes place among the same groups, among the, like, you are students, we are teachers. So a discussion between the student is horizontal. Hierarchy, equivalent employees, and the emphasis at the same seniority levels. So this must be including the communication that is necessary for the facilitate of the coordinations. It is particularly to save the time and energy and the procedures where it must be done in order to achieve it. So the diagonal communication is a crosswise communication which must be included in the production that starts with the vice president of the company towards the employees, first of all, then to the chairman, and then to the horizontal. So covering all these, sum up these employees, and so the communicates with the another employees, regardless the whatever the managers, whatever the officers, whatever the senders are sending to you, are communicating to you, are dealing to you. So what should be done and what should be not done? The instructions given to that is surely the negligences of that. So the last topic of today is importance of communication. No doubt, communication has a central, integral, vital, important, very fundamental roles in one's life. But when we spend a true form of time communicating with others, communicating with relatives, communicating with friends, colleagues, employees, students, so we have various social needs such as pleasures, it in pleasure purpose, for affection purpose, for an incursion, for a relaxation, for the time taken, which can be fulfilled by communicating with others. So the communicating is necessary for our society and plays a prominent role and eminent role in the functioning of different professional organizations. It has been observed that most of the conflicts in any professional step up are generated due to the miscommunication. By developing effective communication skills, professionals can establish a good relationship with each other and thus avoid misunderstandings. It would not be exaggeration to say that this organization functions through communication. Without communication, there would not be any organization. So there are very good kinds of communicative skills. LSRW. L stands for listening, S for speaking, R for reading, W for writing. LSRW. So the major is the listening, speaking, reading and writing. What is listening? I have told you, when you hear any kind of message from another person, either it includes information, idea, concept, or the listener which can be interested, empathy, or boredom. So interviews, group discussions, meetings, etc. demands effective listening skills. Speaking, when it involves the ability to express one's message effectively to the other audience through the spoken words. Reading is a complex skill to encode as it requires decoding and comprehending written message. Skills such as vocabulary, the reading material, the structures and aphorisms, and writing. Writing communication is the second form of communication which is transmitted through words. Through words, when you get a graphic element on a piece of paper, it becomes a document. A professional world, effectively writing skills are required to write documents such as reports, letters, mails, essays, memos. So this is how, in order to wind up, in order to conclude my today's lecture, I started it with the first of all, the introduction to communication, then what is communication, process of communication, elements of communication, levels of communication, flow of communication, then vertical communication, horizontal, and importance of communication, and last of all was communicative skills of communication. Thank you to all and God bless you. Allah Hafiz.